Thank you so very much for joining me today. Today's article is the 16 slave owners who served in Congress in the 20th century. This was 5 hours ago, and the author is Maria Wood. And this is 24/7 Wall Street. Um, the reason why I really wanted to do this article is because we've heard a lot of, as far as us getting our reparations as American slaves. Um, you've always heard them say, "Oh, well, you can't get it because that was so far in the past, and um, and that didn't happen to like you specifically." Um, I've always find it funny that we pick and choose the history that we want to listen to because every 4th of July, what do? Every holiday that we have comes from the past and about something from the past. But when it comes to actually dealing with and repaying the descendants of slaves, it's always, oh, it happened so long ago. So this article is to show that this is not so long ago. Us getting our freedom and our civil rights didn't happen that long ago. There are still people that are alive today that have went through that and do know exactly what happened. And you just have a lot of people that want to scapegoat and, like I said, cherry pick the history of what they want to celebrate and what they don't want to celebrate. Fortunately, that type of thinking is coming to an end. And it really starts with us educating ourselves and learning about things, even if they're uncomfortable, because unfortunately, one of our issues is the CRT thing, and people now just throwing that around just for people to shut up. And we have a law in Florida, a bill in Florida. I don't even know if that's passed yet about not hurting white people's feelings. And I find that funny because it always seems that their comfort is so much more important than our lives. And I think that is so unfair. I think that a whole lot of people understand it, but they want to act blind towards the issue and the situation that we have going on right here because they don't want to lose that privilege that they have. They don't want to lose it. But unfortunately, it's going to be lost because we can no longer sustain this kind of thinking and living and doing. It works out for no one, even fellow white people. In the long run, this doesn't help you at all. You gotta understand this. This type of behavior, this white supremacy stuff, it's not gonna work for you. It's not meant to work for you, especially the poor white people. It's not meant for you. All you are a buffer between the rich and dark people. So here we go with this article. It has been some 6 decades since the Civil Rights Act passed in 1964. Yet considerable work remains in combating systematic racism and other forms of racial discrimination in America today. To better understand the sources of racism and how to change it, it is important to remember while how white supremacists viewed and dominated our institutions during our nation's newly 200 years of legal slavery. While slavery seems somewhat distant, it is just a century ago that former slave owners, people who had owned human beings, served in the U.S. Senate and House of Representatives. Among them were former Confederate soldiers and pro slavery advocates who served in the late 19th century and the earlier 20th century and often supported legislation codifying racial segregation and discriminatory voting laws. To determine which members of Congress owned slaves in the 20th century, 24/7 Wall Street reviewed a database of congressional slaveholders completed by the Washington Post. According to the Post research, based in the census and other historical records, more than 1,700 people who served in the U.S. Congress in the 18th, 19th, and early 20th centuries enslaved black people at some point in their lives. The Post used 18th and 19th century census records and considered more than 5,500 members of Congress who were born before 1840 and had reached 21 at the time of the census taken just before the start of the Civil War in 1860. When President Andrew Johnson pardoned Confederate soldiers in 1868, he returned them full citizenship rights, except they could no longer own human beings. The pardon excluded high ranking Confederate politicians and military leaders. As full citizens, they could run for political office, thus shaping legislation and views on how former slaves were to be treated. And most retained their white supremacist mindset in the aftermath of the war and Reconstruction. States and localities enacted a series of Jim Crow laws as backlash against the newly freed slaves, also known as black codes. Jim Crow statutes set where former slaves could work and what they would be paid, among other restrictive clauses. Although the people listed here served the United States Senate and House of Representatives, many also served as, excuse me, many also served at the state and local level where Jim Crow laws originated before taking national office. Most of these congression, excuse me, Most of these congressmen and senators did not hide their segregationist and bigoted views. Edmund Winston Pettis and George Washington Gordon served as a Grand Dragons of the Ku Klux Klan. Rebecca Latimer Felton supported lynching, but thankfully only served one day in Senate. The Ku Klux Klan was not so secret organization. Yet, Mississippian Charles Edward Hooker changed in anti union rhetoric after the war and criticized racial discriminatory laws. The nation eventually struck down Jim Crow laws and is today remembered as one of the most important moments in the civil rights movement. But unfortunately, that's not completely true because we're still dealing with sundown towns, we're still dealing with very violent police officers, and we're dealing with trigger happy people that have no problem with pulling the trigger on us or calling the cops. This stuff never went anywhere. Y'all just named it something else. You just called it something else. But let's move on. It always seems like, uh, like this article said at the beginning, they want to act like it's been so long ago. No, it wasn't that long ago. If you still got people alive today from that time and they can recollect stuff, that wasn't that long ago. And all this is just to make white people feel better about not being a part of the hate, even though they express it every day. Because let's face it, the CRT y'all can get rid of that stuff today. Still doesn't stop the fact that there are conversations that are being had in the car. There are conversations that are being had around the kitchen table. There are stories that are being told that make people feel nostalgic and good again about burning bodies while you go on your Sunday picnic. But here we go. This dry fella here look absolutely dry. John Henry Hoffaker, mm, served in Delaware. He was born in, wow, whatever, Delaware in 1827, educated as an engineer and originally the member of the Whig Party. He switched to the Republican Party in 1856, and in 1898, Akerfer was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, serving only 1 year before his death of a stroke in 1900. Excuse me. Let me move this up. Hopefully, I feel like editing tonight. Come this next dry person. Good Lord. Donaldson Caffrey. You see his stats. I'm not gonna read all that. And look how recent. Look how recent. He started in 1892. His end date was in 1901. He died in office. He owned sugar plantations and worked as a lawyer. But it was so long ago, y'all. Please remember it was so long ago. William Elliott from South Carolina. He started in 1887, ended in 1903, died in 1907. University of Virginia Law School. He began his practice in 1861, but joined the Confederate Army at the outbreak of the war. He earned the rank of lieutenant colonel. Elliott was the first elected 50th Congress in 1887 and served until 1903. Again, dry. He looked a little bit more moist, but racism dries you out. Let's be honest. Charles Edward Hooker. Read them stats. Served in Mississippi. Started in 1875, ended in 1903. He served as the Mississippi House of Representatives. Charles Edward Hooker represented the state as secession commissioner. He joined the Confederate Army as a private and later promoted to lieutenant and captain of the 1st Regiment of Mississippi Light Artillery. Still after the war, records suggest Hooker criticized racial discrimination. Hmm. Hmm. George Graham Best served in Missouri. Start date 1879. End date 1903. Wow. What happened in 1903? We got to find that out. What happened in 1903? A strong advocate for slavery during the Missouri secession crisis. George Graham Best sided with the Confederacy and authored the secession ordinance passed by the Missouri legislature in 1861. Best reportedly originated the phrase history is written by the victors, which was used to justify the lost cause philosophy that championed the Confederate cause. Despite his advocacy for the South, he once defended an African American man accused of murder and got the man acquitted. Hmm. Still racist, still dry. Frances Marion Cockrell. Let me guess, 1903. Okay, 1905 this time. I wonder what happened at that time. The beginning of the Civil War, Francis Marion Cockrell joined the Missouri State Guard as a captain. He was eventually promoted to colonel of the Confederate States Army in the 2nd Missouri Regiment in 1862. Cockrell commanded a brigade during the Vicksburg campaign. After the war, he served in the U.S. Senate from 1875 to 1905 as a senator from Missouri. President Theodore Roosevelt appointed Cockrell to the Interstate Commerce Commission in 1905. In that job, he negotiated the boundary between Texas and the New Mexico Territory, which was slated to become a state. William Brimage Bate served in Tennessee. Start date 1887 to 1905. A supporter of secession prior to the Civil War, William Burnage Bate owned slaves and fought for the Confederacy, rising to the rank of Major General and leading a division in the Army of Tennessee. Fighting in several major battles, Bate was seriously wounded twice. He served as the 23rd governor of Tennessee and a U.S. Senator from 1887 until his death in 1905. It's making me curious. A bunch of them died. Like, uh, let's keep going. Uh oh. Rufus. We got a Rufus. Okay. This one is from Georgia. He served from 1889 to 1906. A Civil War veteran, Rufus Ezekiel Lester served as a member of the Georgia State Senate from 1870 to 1879, and Savannah Mayer from 1883 to 1889. Elected to the 51st U.S. Congress in 1889 as a Democrat, he served until his death in 1906. Dry. John Taylor Morgan served in Alabama from 1877 to 1907. John Taylor Morgan owned slaves before the Civil War and during the war, and he served as general in the Confederate States Army. An ardent supporter of Jim Crow laws, states' rights, and racial segregation during Reconstruction, Morgan served 6 terms in the U.S. Senate representing Alabama. Dry. Just dry. Ugh. Okay. Ah, that's who the Edmund Pettus Bridge is named after. Okay. Edmund Winston Pettus, Alabama, from 1897 to 1907. Edmund Winston Pettus is considered by many as a racial terrorist for the exing pro slavery views and actions against African Americans before and after the Civil War. Pettus served as a senior officer in the Confederate States Army, commanding an infantry and unit in the Western Theater during the Civil War. After the war, he served in the U.S. Senate from 1897 to 1907, as was also a Ku Klux Klan, mm, let me say that right, a Ku Klux Klan Grand Dragon. The Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, site of one of the bloodiest battles of the Civil Rights Movement in 1965, is named after him. So you're right, that's who that big bridge is named after. This dry thing right here. McCreary. McCreary. Okay. This is James Bennett McCreary. Hope I said his last name right. This gentleman served in Kentucky from 1885 to 1909. James left his law practice to join the 11th Kentucky Cavalry during the Civil War. Fighting under Confederate General John Hunt Morgan, he was captured by Union forces at the Battle of Buffington Island in Ohio and West Virginia in 1863 and 1884. What? He was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, where he served 6 terms. Dry. James Gordon, Mississippi. He served from 1909, a year. Damn. Okay, sorry. Oh, and he died. Did you die during work? Okay, sorry, y'all. Uh, he served from 1909. Wait a minute, that won't even long. Look, peep the start date. The peep the date start date was December the 27th of 1909. He died February the 22nd, 1910. Y'all, that won't number 3 months. For okay, let's see what happened. During the Civil War, James Gordon was a colonel in the Confederate Army, and as a special commissioner, he organized a visit to European countries in 1864 on behalf of the South. When he returned to North Carolina in January 1865, he was captured but fled to Canada. He returned to the U.S. to successfully defend himself against charges he was part of the conspiracy to assassinate Abraham Lincoln. Gordon was appointed to fill the vacancy left by the death of Elysium J. McLaurin, who served from 1909 to 1910. Are you serious? Oh my goodness, y'all. That was like 3 months. Again, dry. 3 months. Okay, all right. You look familiar. George Washington Gordon. This fellow's from Tennessee. His start date was March 1907. He ended it in August 9th, 1911. George Washington Gordon rose from the ranks of general in the Confederate Army. After the Civil War, Gordon practiced law in Pulaski, Tennessee, but was also involved in the in the formation of the Ku Klux Klan, raising the position of Grand Dragon of the realm of Tennessee. His book, Precept, outlined the Klan's purpose and principles. He served the U.S. House of Representatives from 1907 until his death in 1911. Y'all don't live long when y'all get them positions. I don't know what changed over and y'all started living longer, but wow. But then again, they've been in wars, like they've been in war. So injuries, I would guess. Augustus Octavius Bacon. This man served in Georgia from 1895 to 1914. A Confederate soldier and segregationalist, Augustus Bacon was a slave owner who served as a Democratic senator from Georgia. In the state, in the Senate, he rose to the position of president pro tempore. After his death, he established a whites only park in Macon, Georgia, in his town. During during the 1960s civil rights movement, oh, I'm pressing the wrong one. Sorry. He established a whites only park in Macon, Georgia, in his will. During the 1960s civil rights movement, the Superior Court struck that provision, and the land was eventually sold for private use. I bet it was dry. Ugh, good lord, man, y'all look rough back in the day. Okay, let's keep going. All right, this fellow served in Alabama from 1899 to 1914. William Richardson enlisted in the 50th Regiment of Alabama Infantry and was wounded and taken prisoner at the Battle of Shiloh. After the war, Richardson studied law and was admitted to the bar in 1867. Elected to the 56th Congress to fill the vacancy left by the resignation of Joseph Wheeler, he was subsequently re-elected to the 57th Congress and served 6 consecutive terms before his death in 1914. When was that taken? And last and not least, we got Rebecca Latimer Felton, served in Georgia. What? Okay, look at this start date from October 3rd of 1922, and it ended November the 21st of 1922. Girl, what happened, girl? Oh my goodness. Are you serious? Girl, that wasn't but a month. Damn, what the hell happened? Okay, hold on. Rebecca Rebecca was the first woman to serve in the Senate. Nearly 88. Oh, no wonder, girl, you about to kick the bucket anyway. Nearly 88 years old, Felton served for only a day. A day? As a placeholder for Georgia's Governor Thomas Hardwick, who was running for the office when another candidate, Walter F. George, won instead. He allowed Felton to take his seat for a single day when Congress reconvened. A suffragist and early feminist, Felton owned slaves and advocated for white supremacy and lynching. So, if y'all wanted to know the difference between white feminists and black feminists, they're said white feminists still wanted to own slaves. They still advocated white supremacy and lynching. They just wanted to be the ones to hold the whip. Okay? I think this was the last lady, the last person, and this was a female to also show you that when they want to put the white woman out there saying that she never owned slaves, she never did this, she never did that. Yes, she did. Yes, she did. She owned slaves. And even if she didn't own them, she enjoyed putting her hands on them, whether violently or sexually. Thank you so very much for listening. I know the fucking well. Okay, about to say.